My name's Manny Nosowsky. I live in San Francisco. I started solving them in the late 1980s, and shortly after that I started trying to construct them.
Manny is one of the top constructors in the country, and he appeals to solvers of all ages. His constructions are so smooth.
I've always liked the kind of puzzle that had a lot of white space in it and very few black squares. What I like about them is that the first sight of it by a solver results in a feeling of intimidation that I can never solve something like that. I was exploring myself, how low can you go as far as black squares are concerned. And in 1998, I did make a puzzle with 21 black squares. From the information I got, I realized that it was a record in its own right, but I didn't know that at the time I made it. I could not get below that count, though, but one other person did. That's Joe DiPietro.
Well, I've always loved the way Manny's 21s looked. I certainly knew it was a record. I set out to break it, to make 20. And I won't lie to you how long it took me to do that. I'm talking 6 hours every day for months.
Well, the fewer black squares you have in the grid, the more white squares and the longer the words. For every black square that you take out of a grid, it makes the puzzle exponentially harder to construct.
The 19 black square puzzle came on as a total accident. I was just going for another one of the 21 black square puzzles, and a lucky break occurred. Once I had these 3 lines, I still don't know whether I can make a puzzle out of it. At that point, I look at down letters, GES, ENT, TTA. There are quite a few possibilities for all of these. I went to the top, and I had beats a dead horse, ethnocentricity, and evening the score. At this point, I noticed something very odd, particularly looking down at what is now 30 down. Pope Innocent I is a legitimate crossword entry for an early pope. By removing those 2 black squares, that's a new record. It felt great. And I knew I was going to have to say something nice to Joe Pietro.
I heard from Will Shorts. He sent me an email saying, before the rumor gets out, Manny's topped your record, and this puzzle is flat out gorgeous.
What Manny is able to do is break the record and have very smooth quality vocabulary. That's first-class puzzle making.
I was a fanboy of Manny Nosowsky going way back.
I would study his grids as much as probably anybody out there.
Such a talented constructor, and just his themelesses are amazing. Like, you see these things with like extremely wide open grids with triple stacks of 15-letter entries.
In particular, the way that his grids flow. Lots of openings and crossings. Things are very rarely cut off on their own little corners, and so getting one part of the puzzle helps you get to another part of the puzzle, and I think those make for the best puzzles to solve.
And I was doing a puzzle, which I have brought today, and I thought it was the best puzzle I'd ever done. It was about when the Earth and Mars were going to be passing the closest it's ever been in 4,000 years or something. And in this puzzle, Manny put the word Earth over the word Mars. They were touching. And then they were touching here again, Mars over the word Earth. And I had never seen anything like that. And across it says the 2 planets this puzzle is about that is passing. So I thought, how did he know that was happening? Which would have been enough. But then for him to have Earth and Mars touch.
I was like, if I could ever build a puzzle that was that cool, that would be an honor, you know. I'm still working on it.
If you've solved any of his puzzles, you know he's a brilliant constructor, of course, but he's just the nicest guy.
He's actually the first cruciverbalist I ever met. I sent him an email when I learned that he was in San Francisco and said, "Do you stoop to dine with your fans?" And he met me and regaled me with stories about many people, including MEmoRiaL Regal, who he said was an absolute prince.
I wrote a letter to Will and I said, who is this Manny Nosowsky? This is like, I want to write him a fan letter. And Will forwarded the letter to Manny. And then Manny wrote back to me saying, "Oh, I know you. You made that earthquake puzzle." And here in San Francisco, earthquakes are kind of a big deal to us. And I'm like, "Here in San Francisco? I live in San Francisco. Do you live here?" And he said, "Yes." And so I said, "Oh my God, well, I would love to meet you." And that's how I first started organizing lunches for the local constructors.
It was always very gratifying to see his name, especially when I could actually finish his puzzles. He stumped me once or twice, along the way. What's the composer's? I don't even know how to pronounce it. Sayans. Like, I remember seeing that in one of his puzzles and being like, no chance. So, I've learned from him a little bit in that respect.
So I met Manny one time before today at a crossword puzzle tournament in Oakland. So that was organized by Andrew Lawrence, and there were about, I don't know, you were there, maybe 50 or 100 people there. Mm-hmm. And Manny was invited down, and everybody knew Manny was coming. And so when Manny came in the room, everyone stood up and gave him a standing ovation, and he kind of looked around. I'm not sure that he realized what was happening, although he probably did. And then we all went out to lunch, different people in different little groups, but I know one group took Manny out to lunch, and I got my picture taken with him.
He inspired me because he didn't even first begin making puzzles until after he was retired. And yet he's made the most of anybody. So he hasn't directly mentored me as a constructor, but he's inspired me as a man, as a Manny, and as a person.
It's always constructors whose work I admired, not only his work, but his longevity in making great puzzles as well. And the fact that I've become a part of this community and moved to the Bay Area and actually gotten to hang out with him makes it all the more gratifying, because he's just as warm and pleasant a person in person as he is on the newspaper page.
When Manny retired, one of the things he started doing was the crossword puzzle, because I used to do it every morning. However, I never felt I had to finish it, and Manny could not understand this. So he went about methodically learning how to find clues, and I thought, we grew up and we were told that's cheating. He said, "But you want to finish and you want to learn." It was a revelation. But once he had become quite an accomplished solver, he decided he really liked to make these puzzles. And then he decided, if I'm going to make them, they're going to get published in the New York Times. It was Stan Newman who agreed to help walk him through what he needed to do. And it was quite amazing for me to watch that whole process, and the determination and the joy he had in making those puzzles.
And those big paychecks.
I had done a few puzzles for Will, and all of a sudden I got a phone call, and this was MEmoRiAL Regal. MEmoRiAL was had his Sunday puzzles published in the San Francisco Chronicle at that time, and I laughed and laughed and laughed, and he was so funny. The absolute funniest person I'd ever met, and the puzzles showed it. He was just so, I just was in awe of this man.